I think we're all just a little bit too trusting. So if you ever buy a recessive ball python or recessive any animal that has recessives, you should always be a little bit skeptical about what the breeder is telling you or what the seller is telling you. And I've been burned. I've actually bought a bearded dragon in the past that I was told was het for 2 different recessive morphs. I bred him to a female that was also het for those 2 recessive morphs. Nothing. Obviously, I went back to the female and the male's breeder or the seller, and I couldn't figure out what was the deal. So I didn't know if it was the female. I didn't know if it was the male. So I ended up breeding that male again to a different het for those both recessives, and same thing, nothing. So it ended up being the male, not the female. So I lost out on that one. I ended up buying that male for way more than I thought he should have been because of his genetics, and I ended up selling him for a lot less than I got him for because it wasn't het for either recessive gene. So it was kind of terrible that it happened to me, but it was a lesson learned. So that's why you need to be skeptical when you are buying recessives. Now, obviously, if you're buying from a reputable breeder, it doesn't matter. They're most likely going to tell you what's up, and they're most likely going to give you all of the details as far as what the parents were, and there's nothing that you should really be skeptical about when you're buying from those reputable breeders. But for the most part, there's a lot of people out there reselling animals, buying whole collections, mixing up information, and they don't know what they're selling. They're just telling you what they can tell you because they don't care. They don't have genetics guarantee. They don't have anything like that. So they're just reselling an animal and they're hoping to make a quick buck from it. So all you can do is be skeptical and be a little less trusting, because that's probably the best bet, and that's the best advice that I can give you. Now, I've actually bought a lot of ball pythons, and for example, this girl here, she is actually pinstripe, VPI xanthic, 66% het pied, and I've actually bought this girl knowing that she was 66% het pied, and I even asked the breeder that I got her from, hey, what do you think of the chances that she proves out het pied? Because obviously there's markers and all of that goes around, and he said 66%, that is a chance that she proves out het pied, because that's really all you can say when you're a breeder. If you start saying things like, oh, I'm pretty sure she's het pied, you're just misinforming the buyer. They're not going to know that she is not actually has. If she doesn't prove out het pied, then I know for sure that it wasn't him. It was me. I was just too optimistic about the fact that she was het pied, and she was in fact not het pied. If you go on Morph Market, or if you go anywhere where somebody's selling you an animal that's a het for a recessive, they might tell you, oh, the markers, or I'm positive that she's het or he's het or whatever. You can't ever be positive. Now, the best thing that's happened to us in the recent years is genetics testing for ball pythons. So genetics testing allows you to figure out if it for sure is a het. Now, there's not genetics testing on all recessives, but for the most part, like pied or clown or albino, all the simple stuff, there is genetics testing for that. So luckily for us, if somebody's telling you, hey, this is a 66% het pied, and you buy it, all you have to do is buy the recessive genetics testing and see if it is in fact het pied, and all you can do is hope for the best and cross your fingers. Now, the only thing I can say about that genetics testing is that it is $65 for one test for one recessive morph. So if I were to, obviously I have a lot invested in this animal already, so $65 isn't going to be make it or break it for me, but I'm already hoping that honestly, for me, it's not, I don't care if she's het pied or not, because I am pairing her to a pied. If she proves out, or if she doesn't prove out, all of the babies are going to be het pied themselves. So I'm not too worried about it. But if my whole program or my whole breeding project was banking on her being het pied, then obviously I should have made sure before I started pairing her and make sure that she was actually het pied. I should have spent that $65 to see if she was het pied or not. Now, obviously, if you are just doing it for the hell of it, if you're just doing it for fun, then it doesn't matter if you have that $65. If you don't want to spend that $65, it's for fun. You're just doing it for the experience. But if you are one of those people that are like, hey, if I breed these 2 snakes together, I could have at least one baby that's $2,000. If you're that guy, if you're that gal, then it probably matters to you. Spend that $65 before you start pairing those snakes so you aren't disappointed when the babies hatch out. So that's my only advice. That's really the only advice I can give to you. If you are really banking on those genetics, do a genetics test before you start pairing. And also have backups, because sometimes you can pair 2 snakes and that female gets all the way to, oh, she's going to be laying soon. She's about 2 months away from laying, and then bam, reabsorbs all her follicles, and you get nothing. So if you have backups, if you have 2 or 3 females for that male, then you'll have a higher chance of getting that $2,000 snake that you sold Dream for. Now for me, all of my pairings are to produce something that I want. If I get extras of them, obviously I will offer them for sale. But for the most part, I'm going to keep a lot of holdbacks this season because a lot of these pairings are to produce something that I actually want. For example, this girl here is a pinstripe pied het lavender. Now I know for a fact that there are already pinstripe dreamsicles out there, but I wanted to create my own because I don't want to spend $2,000 on a pinstripe dreamsicle. So instead, I bought this girl for $500, and I bought a pastel lavender het pied for $500. Or no, he was $600. And yeah, it's going to be a little while before I start pairing them, but for the most part, I don't mind it because I'm in it for the experience. And she's going to grow to be a beautiful snake, and eventually I'll get some pinstripe dreamsicles. So another thing, if you're banking on something, genetics testing, because if it's not 66% het pied, if it's 50% het pied, or if it's possible het pied, you need to know. I have a female right here. She is actually in shed, so hopefully she doesn't hiss at me and try to eat me. But this girl, she is an inchy pied, 50% het albino, and I already know 50% isn't a really good chance, but 50% is better than just possible. So most people will actually label 50% as possible instead of just saying 50%. And I'm not sure why they do that, but I prefer when somebody tells me 50% instead of possible, because 50% allows me to understand the fact that this snake has a 50% chance of breeding and producing that albino snake that I want, versus possible makes it seem like one of the parents is possibly het for that gene. So I would make this baby also possible for that gene. So that's really what I hear when I hear someone say possible, is there's a chance that one of the parents was possibly het for that gene. So there's also a possibility that this snake is het for that gene, which is why I prefer 50% over the word pos or possible whenever it is a 50% het for a recessive. So normally I do show my snakes in my photo box, in my light box, but I'm getting tired of that and it becomes a lot more work. So I have to record 3 times just to get that going. So I'm actually doing it this way for a little bit to see how it goes. Let me know if you enjoy it. Another thing I want to show you is this pied possible pastel. Now I'm going to say she is pastel just because of how bright she is, but possible pastel is not a definite answer. So I'm going to say she is possible pastel. She is probably very close to just being pastel to me because of how bright she is, but I'm still going to treat her as possible pastel. If her offspring has pastel in it, then I'll know for sure that she's a pastel, because I actually plan on breeding her to a mahogany pied male. And if for some reason I get pastels or pastel mahoganies, then I'll know for sure that she's a pastel. She's the only way that I could get pastels out of that pairing. So let's see. And that's another thing you want to be careful with, is when somebody says possible for a dominant or co-dominant morph, is you have to be realizing what that means. Usually you find possible co-dominant and dominant morphs and ivories and bells, and that's really because it's a white snake. There's no way you can know exactly what's there. Now, obviously, with a lot of like the ivories, you can just put a black light to it and see what patterns they have to see what it is. But for the most part, like this girl here is a pastel ivory. And the person I got her from said she's possibly a super pastel ivory. There's no way of knowing super pastel over pastel with this ivory, because the black light's not going to tell you that. But for the most part, if she is super pastel, I'll know for sure, because all the babies will be pastel. She's being paired to a gravel male. So if I only get pastel, so I mean every snake is a pastel. So I mean she'll actually be, in fact, a super pastel instead of just a regular pastel. She is super white. I'm pretty sure she might be super pastel, but there's no way of being certain. So I'm still going to say possible super. She's being difficult. Come on, go back in there. So obviously, that's the one thing you need to be looking for is anything that's listed as 66% het, 50% het, possible het, or anything that's listed as possible for any codominant or dominant genes. So that's really all you got to look for. That's what you got to be skeptical with. That's what you got to be careful with. Always make sure you get an idea of what the pairing was that produced that snake, because if you don't, then you won't be for certain if that snake is exactly what the breeder is telling you or the seller is telling you. Now, I always think that there's always a good chance someone's lying to you, but if they have proof to back it up, then obviously that's when you start believing them. I'm always just going to say you have to show me proof before I believe you. Obviously, like I said, if it's a reputable breeder, there's really no reason for you to be skeptical. But if it's someone that's just started breeding, or someone that's reselling, or someone that's selling a whole collection that they bought from somebody else, that's when you have to be skeptical. So obviously, like always, if you made it this far into the video, I appreciate it. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything that I put out in the future. Also, I have some merch on. If you haven't checked out my merch store, it's in the description below. This is a piebald. So this shirt is actually of this snake right here. Her name is Blanca. She is pied het albino. She was actually one of my first snakes. She was probably like number 4 or number 5. And I've had her for a good bit. And she is one of my favorite snakes. So I had to put her on a shirt. Hopefully you like the shirt. Hopefully you buy a shirt. And hopefully you like Blanca. So I appreciate it. Like I said, have a good day. Peace.